rename yourself or whatever you want to do.
Okay, I guess we are live.
I think we are live. Welcome, everybody. I will hand over to Candace.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. My name is Candace Carson. I'm the International Chair of Democrats Abroad and very thrilled to be with all of you today. And especially a warm welcome to you, Malcolm, and to you as well, Ruth. We're thrilled to have you for this event. I'm going to toss this to our Democrats Abroad Germany Munich chapter chair, Karina Detweiler, who's going to give some opening remarks before we get started. Karina?
Thank you, Candace. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of our guests, to our Democrats Abroad members, and to all of you who have joined this call from around the world. My name is Karina Detweiler. I am the chair of Munich and Southern Bavaria chapter of the Democrats Abroad Germany. I would like to welcome you to today's discussion with Malcolm Nance and Professor Ruth Ben-Ghiat. We cannot think of two people we would rather hear from on the 1-year anniversary of the violent uprising that narrowly failed to stop the certification of our elections. Malcolm Nance is a longtime friend of Democrats Abroad and one of the nation's foremost counterterrorism experts. You have probably seen him on MSNBC sharing his wisdom and his outrage with the American public. Malcolm Nance is the author of The Plot to Betray America, and his new book, They Want to Kill Americans, will be out this summer. Ruth Ben-Ghiat is a professor of Italian and history at New York University. She is the author of Strongmen, Mussolini to the Present, now available with a new introduction. Professor Ben-Ghiat is also extremely generous with her time and expertise on national media outlets, and you can subscribe to her newsletter, Lucid, on Substack. And I believe they're going to put a link in the chat for that. We are very honored to have both of our guests here today and look forward to hearing their remarks.
Thank you, Karina. And before we get started, I did just want to say a few more words to those of you attending. Maybe this is your first event with Democrats Abroad on this tragic anniversary of January 6th. Perhaps you're tuning in on Facebook. I wanted to say just a few words about what Democrats Abroad is and what we do as an organization. We're actually the largest group of US citizens outside of the United States, and we're also an official arm of the Democratic Party. Our mission within the entire party ecosystem is to make sure that Americans abroad have a voice in our government and that we mobilize overseas to elect Democratic candidates back home. If you haven't already, you're going to hear it again. Please go to votefromabroad.org today to request your ballot for 2022 elections. Please do it now and get it out of the way so that you're not disenfranchised come this fall. As you know, there is so much at stake. 34 US Senate seats, all 435 US representative seats, 46 state legislatures, and 36 governorships are up for grabs in November. These are the offices where the decisions that impact you and your family's day-to-day lives, both abroad and at home, are made. Regardless of where you vote in the United States, be it in Florida, be it in Maine, be it in Wyoming, I urge you one last time to go to votefromabroad.org and get that ballot. I'd like to thank everyone for organizing today's event, particularly Teresa Ritterhof and Angela Fobbs of DA Germany, as well as the Munich chapter spearheaded by Karina. On January 6th, most of us were celebrating the twin victories in Georgia when disturbing videos started circulating online. To establish and preserve the narrative of January 6th, we'll take a brief look at the events that took place 1 year ago today.
So we're going to see some of what our witnesses saw on January 6th. Let's see the video, please. But please be advised that it contains graphic images and strong language, which many may find disturbing.
Hey, brother, we're boots on the ground here. We're moving on to Capitol now. I'll give you a boots on the ground update here in a few.
Multiple capital entries! Multiple capital entries! weapon objects, missiles to include bottles and rocks, and hand-thrown chemical-grade fireworks. This is now effectively a riot.
1349 hours declaring it a riot.
Okay, guys, apparently this tip of the spear has entered the Capitol building.
If I give this up, they're going to have direct access. At least this Capitol we can defend. We gotta hold what we have.
Take your pins off. Yeah. The fuck?
Take your pins off.
Where the fuck are they?
Cruiser 50 has planked. 1033. I repeat, 1033, west front of the Capitol. We've been planked and we've lost the line.
Lock the shields! Lock them together! Lock them together! Patriots! Run! Jimmy, get him to the back! Get him to the back! Get him to the back! Let's get some fresh faces up front! All right, let me out! Come out here! Can I speak to Pelosi? Yeah, we're coming, bitch! Oh, my bitch, we're coming for you too, fucking traitor!
They've got the gallows set upside the Capitol building. It's time to start fucking using them.
Start making a list, put all those names down, and we start hunting them down one by one.
Traitors get guillotined!
Mobilize in your own cities, your own counties, storm your own Capitol buildings, and take down every one of these corrupt motherfuckers. So we fucking need to have 30,000 guns. That's true.
He'll be back, he warns us. It's just chilling.
Echoing what many of you just said in the comments, that is still a very incredibly disgusting and painful video to watch, and for those emotions and memories to come up again is difficult. But I'm really glad that we're having this conversation today. And thank you for being here, for making this a priority, for making sure that this doesn't just get lost as another day in US history, because it is certainly not. And I'm excited now to hear your thoughts, Malcolm and Ruth, on January 6th as we commemorate this unfortunate series of events in the United States. I invite you to comment on the importance of this date for the people who, like us, work every day on a voluntary basis to hold the line and defend our democracy from abroad. What have we learned since then? How should that knowledge guide us going forward? I know these are questions on many of our minds, and Malcolm, I'd invite you to begin.
Okay, well, thank you. And as you all know, I love the Democrats Abroad mission. I lived in the United Arab Emirates for 10 years. So I was a member of DA from Abu Dhabi. Actually, we had to go up to Dubai to meet. And a few years ago, when I was speaking at the American Library in Paris, I hooked up with first we went to DA UK. I think we were in London. We had a little event there, and then I enjoyed my time in Paris, helping register voters in front of Shakespeare and Co. And we even got Ethan Hawke, the actor. We stopped him. He was walking by, and we got him to register to vote back in the States because he had conveniently forgotten it. So I love the DA mission. But that brings us to the sad tale and spectacle we just saw, which is going to make your participation in the upcoming election critical. I know in the 2018 and the 2020 election, I believe you may have had the largest turnout of vote in your history. I'm not quite sure. I believe I saw that in one of your commentaries. It's going to be proved critical this November. For all of the Sturm und Drang that you're seeing today with regard to the 1-year anniversary of the attack on the Capitol, things have not gotten better. My book that's coming out a little later this year is called They Want to Kill Americans, the malicious, terrorist, and deranged ideology of the Trump insurgency. It was originally called The Coming Trump Insurgency. We changed it because it has arrived. I called this 62 days in advance when I was on Real Time with Bill Maher 3 days after the election. And I saw it coming. I was watching their communications. We were monitoring their chats. We saw that these militias were going into training mode. They thought that if Trump won, they would be the unofficial brown shirts, the paramilitary of the campaign. But when he lost, they decided that they were going to become the insurrectionists and insurgents who would take America back by force. And so on the 6th of January, I was monitoring their video feeds in real time. I had 3 teams monitoring, and by 1:30, we had to bring up 6 teams. So many people were attacking that building. We were watching them enter the building in real time and hunt for individuals. This game could have ended if Donald Trump had said something along those lines. But as you know, he didn't say anything. And in fact, since the insurrection, they have only picked up steam. And they really are organizing way on the down low now. Don't let, just because they haven't started arresting people all over the country for something other than 1/6, doesn't mean that they're not planning. If you haven't been back to the States, all you have to do is go to a gun store to get an idea of just how bad it is. Gun sales are at their top record in history in 2021. I am a long distance rifle shooter. AR-15 ammunition went from 21 cents per bullet before the 2020 election to $1.25 a bullet today. That tells you how the demand for AR-15 ammunition is out there. So that's a quantifiable yardstick that you can use for people and what they think they are going to do, or, in their talk of civil war. I can't even imagine using the phrase civil war. I've spent my entire life defending this nation against dictators, warlords, and potentates. And now I have American citizens who are looking for trouble. They are looking for a fight. But the one thing they can't beat is your vote. And this is why they have changed over 500 laws, proposed 500 laws to strip the vote away from many people, including If you're not president in the United States, they're trying to take away the vote in some places. If you're a university student or a professor, that you can't vote in their jurisdiction, even though you live there all the time. So it is critically important that we understand today is the first day in the full-scale, wholehearted defense of democracy. So when you go out on the streets and you meet those American citizens out there, you let them know that democracy is defended everywhere.
Thank you so much for that, Malcolm, for that boost and sense of urgency. And I like that idea that today is the first day of the full-throated defense of democracy. We heard Biden's speech. I think that also had a new tone. Ruth, I would like to invite you now to speak to us today. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me here on this sad day. I'm going to start with a quote from the Biden speech today. I did not seek this fight brought to the Capitol 1 year ago today, but I will not shrink from it either. I will stand in this breach. I will defend this nation. And as a first-generation American, child of immigrants and scholar of what happens when democracy is destroyed, Biden's speech brought tears to my eyes. And these are really the words of a warrior. I will stand in this breach. I will defend this nation. Mm-hmm. And we're living through extraordinary times when things that few people thought were possible are actually happening. And Malcolm and I have very different professional backgrounds, but we were among the first to speak out about the threat Trump presented because we know what the breakdown of the democratic order can look like. And we're living through that today. January 6th was many things. It was a profoundly radicalizing event. It was an assault on the altar of democracy. It broke taboos of every kind, sending members of Congress and even Mike Pence, the poker-faced loyalist, running for their lives. And the day it happened, I wrote a piece for CNN late into the night, calling it a coup attempt. I continue to use that word because it was an inside job, not only because Trump was trying to stay in power and keep the forces of social progress out, like Kamala Harris, the first female vice president and person of color. And by the way, by denying the results of the election and in November 2020, Trump prevented us in part from celebrating that. And there's been no closure on the Trump presidency because he's held everything in suspense, and his followers have never had to reckon with the fact that they lost. So Biden today talked about, he's a defeated former president. So it's very important. It wasn't just about keeping Trump and GOP white supremacists in, it's about keeping the quote, wrong people out. And I totally agree with Malcolm's analysis. We are in this insurgency, and January 6th was so dangerous because it brought together all these different kinds of extremists. And, Trump couldn't get the military to play his coup game. So he got together like a bespoke army of thugs. And these thugs are from inside the institutions, many of them. There were over 50, state and local GOP officials. There were retired active duty military, law enforcement, all of these people, plus new radicalized individuals who didn't have any prior, attachments to extremist groups, but they all found each other. And so now this kind of movement, and Trump always called his political force a movement from the beginning, and now they have a huge impetus. So this coup failed to keep out Biden and Harris, but it was a huge success. And so some of the milestones is, obviously when Trump refused to accept the results of the election, but also January 7th. And I was watching really closely because Trump was so toxic. There was this loss of life they bashed in the heads and killed police officers, the supposed law and order party. So the GOP could have actually turned away and said, Trump's toxic and we're not gonna underwrite this. And instead they did the opposite. They doubled down. So that was a fundamental, and that set us on the path we are today. The other thing it did, it enshrined, actually strengthened Trump's personality cult, because it strengthened his claim of being a victim. And he's a very good storyteller. He's really one of the most skilled propagandists of the early 21st century. And he has this story of moral injustice, like something that's rightfully his has been taken away. And he's really good at telling that story, and everybody echoes it. So victimhood's really important to the whole strongman thing. It's been since Mussolini and Hitler. It's always been that way. And so Trump's not just a politician, he's a storyteller, but he's a cult leader. And so I really see January 6th, it's an action of a race war, it's a coup attempt, but it's also a kind of authoritarian cult leader rescue operation. Mm-hmm. And the other thing it did is enshrine violence as an acceptable way of solving your political problems and moving history forward. And that's, fundamental to authoritarian history. And that kind of legitimizing violence is why we're in the middle of this wave of threat, right? It's not just electoral trickery, it's going to be extrajudicial violence and coming from many, parts. And that's what Malcolm talks about a lot. So I just want to also say that, Trump, it was difficult for many Americans who live there to understand what Trump was about early enough. He was in power to wreck our democracy. He was also in power to detach America from the democratic world order and insert it into this autocratic, what I've been calling since 2017, Axis 2.0. And the other thing is that he never had anything in common in terms of his goals and priorities with any president, either Republican or Democratic. His goals were autocratic ones. And one of them was making money off of public office. So when he spent 1 out of every 3 days going to visit Trump properties, people were saying, oh, he's so lazy, he's just golfing. Well, he's not golfing, he's promoting Trump properties and making money off the presidency and charging the Secret Service. And then he needed to polarize us and get people into survivalist mode so that they depend on him. So the whole loyalty personality cult thing. Mm-hmm. So I think, I grew up with parents who are from 2 very different countries, father from the Middle East, my mother's from Scotland, and grew up in the US, but US politics and history were not the things most discussed in my household. And my parents have lived abroad for many decades. Neither of them are Democrats. They're on the opposite end of the political spectrum. But I think having this global outlook is what allowed me to look at Trump with the lens of global autocracy. And of course, he's rooted in American history. It's very, very important, the whole rhetoric of civil war, but to capture his actions and what's going on now with the GOP, he kind of made into this authoritarian party. You can't just use the history of a democracy for that. So, and the last thing I want to do is just talk about what can be done, especially by people living abroad. And I think that a sticky thing that very few people want to hear about is you have to go after their money. You have to tackle, and this isn't just about America, but autocrats like Orban. You have to go after the enablers, the international lawyers, the business people, the corporations that sit there in they're in Moscow, they're in Budapest. They shouldn't be there, because when you have these corrupt states, all of the money, the profits, that they'll just go right to the crony capitalism and then to the offshore illicit things, banks and all that. And so we have to get very serious about calling out the enablers, and also alert the American business and financial community that violence is going to be very bad for their business. That's a really important point. Whether they're expatriates or whether they're in the center of money laundering, which is South Dakota or Delaware, it's going to be very bad for business. So those are things that we can do that have not adequately been done before. So I'll stop there. I know there'll be lots of questions, but it's really poignant that the big struggle of the 20th century of democracy versus autocracy. Now the US is the frontier. It's happening inside our country, and everybody is watching. And the story of democracy has partly been a US story. It's very sad that we're in this situation.
Thank you both very much for sharing your thoughts on this day. And we now would like to open it up to questions and invite you all to ask your questions to Ruth and Malcolm if you have them. So please, as Angela wrote in the chat, if you have a question, write *** hand up, and then indicate if your question is for Malcolm or Ruth, and then we will get to you so you can pose your questions.
We have two people in the queue already. The first is Mark Neal. Mark, do you want to unmute and ask your question?
Yeah, hi. My name is Mark Neal. I'm a voter from Texas, and I live in or close to Tübingen in Germany. I have a kind of long question, so I wrote it down. I hope you bear with me a minute. I read your recent interview, Ruth, with Malcolm from your Lucid newsletter yesterday, and in reference to Steve Bannon as the national security advisor to the insurrection, Malcolm describes how the entire system is now wired to listen to what he and others say. I think we all agree that the fragmented and unfact-checked media environment in which we today live is a key factor in the growth of the societal divisions, which culminated in the January 6th insurrection attempt and in the continued spread of the big lie following it. Certainly, the loss of the fairness doctrine in the 80s opened the door to this fracturing of news and other information into the ideological bubbles that are so widespread today. But the limitless channels of communication which the internet has made possible also remove any constitutional basis for reenacting any similar regulation on speech. So the question to either or both of you is, what can be done either individually or policy-wise to bridge the cultural and information divides which separate us?
Ruth, you want to take that first?
Yeah, I think your question has lots of components, but there's of course been a lot of discussion of what the media hasn't done right. And, it's like one of the great things that happened over the Trump years is the rebirth of investigative journalism. And we live in a democracy, so that's why we know about all the stuff behind the scenes of January 6th. It's extraordinary that we have the PowerPoint turned over by Mark Meadows, the January 6th committee. We know all this stuff because we live in a democracy. And that's something that's really good. Now, the big agenda for the media, and there's more and more discussion, and I think January 6th was a wake-up call, and today is a wake-up call, is that the erosion or the end of American democracy is the story of the century. It's the story, and that it has to be treated as front page news. It's still quite incredible that the New York Times, when the coup PowerPoint was discovered, it had this neutral headline, and it was like not even on the front page. It just said, House Committee examines PowerPoint. That's like, well, what kind of PowerPoint was it? It was a coup PowerPoint. So there's that. And the other thing I've said for some years, including to journalists, because a lot of my work is also educating journalists, is that it's very important to denounce villains, and we all do this, but it's really important also to show that there's lots of heroes, there's lots of warriors for democracy who have made the fight against taking away our rights their center. And there's all these interesting initiatives. There's Citizen University of Eric Liu, which brings people together. There's Braver Angels. There's a lot of different civil society groups that are trying to bridge divides, and we need the media to feature these also as a morale booster, as inspiration, and to get people involved.
Let me address the point that was at the end of your question, which was, what can we do to bridge this divide? We're in a very, very serious disinformation war in the United States. I wrote my first book about that 8 weeks before the 2016 election in a book called Plot to Hack America, in which I saw the Russian operation with Hillary Clinton's emails as a psychological and disinformation warfare attack on the United States using every component of Russian government power. I was called a conspiracy theorist for almost 2 years. I mean, there was a famous case where Andrew Sullivan, on the very show that I was on, Hardball, actually said that I was a fabulist and a conspiracy theorist, until the Mueller report came out and every word was validated. But I was looking at it from the perspective of an intelligence analyst, an intelligence perspective, in how they attacked us but one of the things that came out of it was the Trump campaign so attached themselves to using the Russian wave of disinformation that by 2018, they had taken over that mission. You didn't need foreign powers to do this for you. The Trump digital campaign had become so powerful, and the right-wing information sphere had moved from having just Fox News as the amplifier and cheerleader to creating two other organizations. One America News Network, OANN, they're crazy. I'm using that as a professional intelligence term. They're crazy. They are as close to Radio Mille Collines, for those of you who might remember Rwanda, okay, the radio channel that was calling for them to go out and exterminate their neighbors. That's what OANN is. And then you have Newsmax, which is like a lighter version of, or more right-wing version of Fox News. We have a disinformation sphere in this country that has captured 1/3 of the population. They will not believe anything an expert like Ruth will say. Not a word of hers. In fact, you're obviously part of the elite deep state. They will not believe anything I say as a defender of this nation, because obviously I'm part of the CIA, NSA cabal that is out to overthrow the government and fill it full of Negroes and, other brown people. Who knows? All I know is this. We have gotten so far behind the ball, and that we have so many Americans now who are steeped in this destructive ideology that views Trump as their Mussolini. All right. And maybe Ruth is going to correct me on this. Okay. Late stage Mussolini, early stage Hitler, right? I mean, he likes the buffoonery of Mussolini, right? But he prefers the actual hands-on machinery of a guy like an early Adolf Hitler, which would bring him into the Viktor Orban, Vladimir Putin sphere of strongmen, right? But that doesn't mean that it's all lost for us. But with regards to that 30% of the population, including a large number that would like to use armed force to overthrow the government, you got to understand something. We cannot talk to them now. I think that even if the United States were attacked today by a foreign power, they would solidly side with the foreign power, so long as they're not Muslim, Arab, or terrorists. But if it came from Russia, if it came from somebody that was giving Joe Biden's their comeuppance, they would side with them, because that is the entire reason the Russians developed this disinformation warfare strategy called the Gerasimov Doctrine. Interesting little note. When I wrote the book, The Plot to Hack America, which again was an intelligence analysis that I delivered in 4 weeks to my publisher, it got printed on the same day, or it got released on the same day, that the CIA delivered an identical report to President Obama, and they were almost mirror image, except for one thing. Amongst the philosophers that were guiding Putin's strategy, I put Steve Bannon. I mean, he is a student of a guy by the name of Alexander Dugin, who is not really Putin's philosopher, but he's one of the guys who believes that the poles of the world have been reversed since 1945, and that the world should really spin around an axis of Russia, Western Europe, right-wing dictatorships, and an American authoritarian America supporting that, as opposed to the old America being the center of global democracy, supporting liberal democracies in Western Europe and in other parts of the world, and Russia being shunted off to the side. This is neo-Eurasianism. Steve Bannon believes in this. And this is why he is spearheading the fascist movement in the United States. Interesting. It's always an ex-military guy, a junior one. Steve Bannon was a junior military officer on a ship somewhere in the Persian Gulf when we had the Iranian rescue mission and it failed. But then again, George Lincoln Rockwell, the true founder of the American Nazis and one of the most utter disgusting racists in American history, was also a World War II pilot. I mean, their service to the nation is no guarantee that they're going to be loyal to this country. So just pay attention to that. But I don't think there's a good bridge we're going to have anytime soon.
Thank you. The next question is from Laura Mosdale. Could you unmute, please, and ask your question?
Yeah, sure. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, this is a question for Ruth. I was very interested in your talking about calling out the corporate enablers of the Republicans, the Trump Republicans, which are basically all of them. I read a couple of newsletters, one called Popular Information, where the author goes and he talks about the companies that pledge not to support the 147 objectors to the certification of the election. And a number of them are starting to break their pledges, like Eli Lilly, PricewaterhouseCoopers, American Airlines, T-Mobile. They're starting to donate again. They're directly contradicting themselves. And when you talk about calling out, is there any sort of individual action you can do? Is there any sort of powerful thing, you can, I guess we can, I'm not a big social media person, but I can write letters, I can make phone calls. Does this have any impact at all? How do you call out these corporate enablers of Trumpism?
I mean, I think that, I'm a big proponent of naming and shaming, but the only thing corporations will only listen to their bottom line. So, and it's hard to get, for large corporations, it's hard to get a citizen boycott initiative that's large enough to have any effect. That said, you should always be writing and calling, because if you don't, autocracies depend on silence. They depend on indifference. They depend on everybody thinking that somebody else is going to be doing it, or being too intimidated to do anything. I think also there's professional censors, censorship of bar associations, medical associations. These people can be denounced, they can be disbarred, they can have their medical licenses removed. And sometimes it's local, the sting of local shame that does it for people, like it hits them where they live. So those are things you can do, but for big corporations, I think those, in Myanmar with the military coup, it's a very interesting story where resistors, who are a lot of them are young and digital savvy, they created apps, like real-time apps to show which businesses are collaborating with the junta. And that's been fairly effective. I mean, in the sense of taking away, it's hit the businesses. Unfortunately, the junta often jails these people. So many of them are in exile now, but there's a lot of room to maneuver. And we saw it in Hong Kong too, with digital resistance and using your power, not just as a citizen if your vote is taken away, but you still have power as a consumer.
Okay, thanks. I'll keep writing and calling.
Our next question is from Julie and Guerneau. Do you want to unmute and ask your question?
Hi. The reports that you gave about the state of the nation, so to speak, are of a different tone than what was also to be heard by Democrats today, like Schumer saying, that democracy is better off or stronger today than a year ago. And that sort of doesn't jive with that. And my question is, why is this happening? Is this sort of a self-preservation or self-soothing tactic to keep our emotions down, or does that actually not it actually not helpful in the respect that we're missing the boat of seeing where things really stand? The question is to any of you.
Malcolm, I'll
Okay.
let's let you do that.
Okay, I'm going to tell you a funny story first. So I'm in the Persian Gulf in the first Gulf War, and I'm on this big helicopter carrier, and we are sweeping for sea mines going into Kuwait. We're about to invade Kuwait. And at 5:30 in the morning, the ship I'm on hits a mine, big honking mine, right? It lifts this 15,000-ton ship up in the air and drops it. So I'm very close to where it happened, and I'm listening to the damage reports, and there is water flooding in, right? It is a very serious situation. To a certain extent, we're sinking. I said to the people around me, we're okay so long as we have power. And then the power went out. A second later, I go, okay, the generators will kick back in, we'll be fine. Generators kick back in. I go up the place, my little spy shack. I'm listening to the reports going out. I know from the damage control teams, we are flooding on multiple levels of the ship with fire and lost generators. Here's what I hear going out. We have sustained some damage. Now, there's a big difference between multiple floors flooding with tens of thousands of gallons of seawater coming in, and you have fires, and sustaining some damage. Chuck Schumer is of the we have sustained some damage school of speech, right? I happen to know from the street level that we are on fire and we are sinking. But today you finally got President Biden coming out and saying what we all know. American democracy is under siege. There is a very, very serious situation happening, and he is calling on all hands to come to the defense of democracy. And I appreciated that today. I said in my Twitter feed, you know, Joe Biden has that old man who can look like he kicked your goddamn ass look of eyes. If you watched, he was sort of squinting the whole time because you could tell he was actually angry. And I loved every second of it.
Yeah, we need some righteous anger because this is a war now, and we're the targets. So, yeah, agree.
Okay, our next question is from, I hope I'm saying this right, Oriana. I'm sorry I skipped you before, Oriana. Please unmute and ask your question.
That's okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you fine.
Okay, great. So I'm sorry I'm off video, but I'm in quarantine. I may have caught Omicron in the Riviera Maya, so sorry about that. First of all, I want to be like, I am such in awe of both of you, Malcolm and Ruth. I follow you like religiously on Twitter. So I wanted to say that first. I'm a political scientist from Arizona State. Studied under Dr. Olson, who's now at Florida International. So we're both big fans. This question is, I've been hearing a lot of questions which are similar to mine, so I'm going to see if I can take it from a different angle for both of you. And Malcolm, especially, you brought up your history in the Middle East, and I'm in Mexico. What can we, and obviously I know part of the answer being here, but what can we learn from Latin America, perhaps? Because as you both know, and especially you, Professor Ruth, as well, a lot of the Latin American countries have been through this. In fact, I think they're only shocked, perhaps, that, at least where I am, that it happened now versus before. So perhaps could you give us an insight? Because a lot of us here are like, you know, we would always say, oh, but the United States is this. Oh, but the United States is that. Well, now, not so much difference.
Ruth, you want to take that first?
Yeah. So I actually see what is going on now as there's this right-wing authoritarian playbook that was used most efficiently in Chile before the coup. And I hate being right. I hate it. there's a part of the playbook, it's this all hands on court delegitimation of a democratic government, using every tool, psychological warfare, low level violence, and creating what they did back then is the CIA and many other government agencies created economic shortages, supply chain disruptions, truck strikes. And so when COVID started creating these kind of supply things, I said, oh, that's going to be manipulated. And so sure enough, like Donald Trump Jr. gets on Twitter and starts talking about how it's reminding him of communist Czechoslovakia, where he used to go with his mother, Ivana, and there were bread lines. So they've checked all the boxes. So basically, this is the frame for seeing what's going on. And this is part of the tragedy that, the US, yes, it's been a beacon of democracy, but it's also helped to undo democracies around the world and is expert at that. There's a whole playbook. And now it's being used by the right in a very effective fashion. And I see this happening. Unfortunately, the editors of large publications don't share my views. So I've been trying for a year and a half to write a manifesto op-ed about this because all the things line up, but so far no one has wanted it because it's too early. This is the curse of being too early. But that's how I see it. So that Chile has lessons about the fall of autocracy. Everybody said it can't happen here. The Chileans said our military is not like those awful other militaries. We're loyal to the Constitution. Mark Milley is in the position of General Prats, who was assassinated eventually, who was like the lone man standing on the side of democracy. There's a lot of parallels. So I'll stop there, but I'm going to write this for someone because it's like spot on because it's the same playbook going on, except the addition of digital and a few other things.
Yeah. Well, if you want, I'll call David Frum and you can get together with Professor Barbara F. Walter, who just wrote her book on coup d'etats, right? Or not coup d'etats, what is it? Civil wars.
Civil wars. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I interviewed her. Yeah.
And you can knock that one out because you can't leave everything to Barton Gellman. She is absolutely right. Ruth is absolutely right. Now, I have had experience on the other side of the world. I watch Latin America with great interest. You guys might know, or you might not know, the reason that I came out of the shadows of the U.S. intelligence community while I was working over in the United Arab Emirates is because I was a writer for a small defense blog called Small Wars Journal. And I wrote an article about waterboarding. And the article was called Waterboarding is Torture, period. And turns out waterboarding was used a lot in many of these countries in Latin America. And I had made some parallels to Argentina, Colombia, Chile, and other places which were led by right-wing dictatorships. This fascination with Chile is very interesting to me because there are two components to it. One, you can have a coup d'etat where you bring the army out into the streets and you take over the police stations, you assassinate your enemies. On the other hand, in terms of insurgency, you can have an underground resistance force, right, that acts like they're a bunch of heroes. I'm talking specifically about the Tupamaros, right, terrorist group there, that also worked in direct confrontation with these governments. You can have both things here in the United States because I think that where the right wing is going is closer to Northern Ireland, not just because they're white, okay, but that's a component of it. Because I've said this many times on TV, their skin color and their allegiance to Trump was the camouflage that allowed all of those protesters to close and engage at close combat and not receive the level of force that any other non-white, non-Trump group of protesters would have gotten, right? So for the most part, I think that there are a lot of parallels that take place with Latin America, but none strikes me the most as the embrace of the Pinochet meme that is going around in the right wing with the the T-shirts, for example, which you see everywhere now, of Pinochet wasn't wrong, or Pinochet did no wrong,
He did
with
nothing
pictures
wrong.
of bodies falling out of helicopters, which is not just the Pinochet thing. The Argentinian junta did that too. After they tortured and murdered you, they dumped your body over the ocean. This is eliminationist rhetoric. And that's what we call it. When I worked the Rwanda mission and we were evacuating the American embassy, and I was the only intelligence resource in the European theater that was watching Africa, I had my French linguist listening to Radio Mille Collines, which was the radio channel that was going, murder your neighbor, kill the cockroaches. And we're trying to get 12 special forces guys and 20 American embassy people out by vehicle in a country where everyone was slaughtering their neighbor. Eliminationist rhetoric is a key indicator to start watching for. And when you wear Camp Auschwitz, a place where I've spoken twice, right? And you wear Pinochet did nothing wrong T-shirts, we are working our way up to that. Oh, one last thing. When I went to Auschwitz 2 years ago, I was invited for a conference in 2019 called Never Again. Really? And they weren't being tongue-in-cheek. They brought people in from other genocides and wondered, could it be happening in America?
Yeah, and I'll just add the reason I go into gruesome detail in the book, I have a violence chapter, and I have gruesome detail about what they did, what Pinochet did for torture, is because of this. Pinochet did nothing wrong. And I wanted to be on the historical record, that he did do wrong things, and they were, torture and murder. And it was unpleasant to write, but it was really essential to do that, because every time you have authoritarianism come, you have a whitewashing of the historical record of their crimes, so that new crimes can be committed.
Okay, wow. Someone wrote in the comments, I don't think I'll sleep tonight. I think I might have to add that.
I saw that. That's my job. You do it well.
Better to know the truth than not. We have another question from Tim Ellis. Do you want to unmute and ask your question, Tim?
Thanks. And thanks to our guests. Really, I'm enjoying this. So I'm on this call and in this group because I want to do what I can to defend democracy. And I read articles, and it's often like Democrats can end the filibuster and pass the Voting Rights Act and stack the Supreme Court, all of which, great, totally for it. But I'm not the Democrats. I'm just a guy. And so I'd love to hear from you. What are things that I, as an individual, could do to defend democracy? Like, I would love like an anti-fascism checklist that I could go through every day.
Well, I'm going to jump into that real quick, because one of the ideas that I've been coming up with, I live in upstate New York now, near Albany, in a district called New York 19, the 19th Congressional District. And to get rid of the previous congressman, they held every Friday a rally at his office, which he never came to for 2 years, called Faso Friday. And Faso Friday started with like 5 people, and it went up to 10 people. And then by time the election was coming, it was a block party every Friday. Everybody went to Faso Friday. And they didn't do anything other than go out, mill out there and go, Faso, where are you, right? The guy lost horribly. This is a district that's 93% white and overwhelmingly like 80% Republican. They elected a Black Democratic congressman who is now coming up for re-election. But they mobilized themselves as a group. You know what I would like to see? Because I don't see this enough, okay? I watch Deutsche Welle. I've been on CBC, out of Montreal. My late wife's family is from Montreal. And let me tell you something. I would love to see DA rallies where every week, everybody in their city, even it's 5 of you, brings those American flags out and signs that say, we're here to defend democracy, and honk your horns or do whatever it is. Get some pointers, especially if you're in Europe. The French and the South Koreans have the greatest protest organizers in the world. Okay, I mean they have uniforms and all sorts of things, and coaches and marshals. I mean, get out there and do that. Imagine that being covered by Deutsche Welle, or that being covered by, France 24, TV 5, or CBC, or Telemundo. That the Americans overseas are making their presence known. That's what I would recommend.
That's a really great idea. And I'll remind people that Black Lives Matter protests were all over the world, as were the Women's March, which just gets forgotten. But there were like millions of people participated in both the Women's March and Black Lives Matter. So, and it was covered, and it's part of it. They were global protests on behalf of American democracy and racial justice. Right. So I like that. I also think 80. It's incredible, and it makes me really angry because I write about people who died, trying to defend the right to vote or get the right to vote back. Because when you lose the right to vote, it takes a really long time to get it back. So the fact that over 80 million people, like self-satisfied doofuses sitting in America, didn't vote and don't vote, excuse my colloquial, sitting in their Barca loungers or whatever, they're just not voting. So that is something that anybody can work on, even from abroad, to help register people to vote, to write to people. Maybe they won't write back because that's part of the all hands on deck, because 80 million people is a lot of people. We had 80 million votes for Biden, and that was a record turnout, but it's also 80 million people who didn't vote. So this is part of sensitizing people. And this is what I think Malcolm and I are doing, many others. Brian, had a video from Brian, sensitizing people as to what are the stakes of losing in this. We have incredible freedom that we're able to speak out. We're not in jail for criticizing the government, those of us who live in America, and we don't want to lose that. And it has to have this sense of urgency to get people to vote.
One last point on my recommendation, because Ruth made a great point. Our European allies came out for Black Lives Matter. Our European allies came out for the Women's March and marched with us, okay? But I'm seeing more of our European enemies, okay, from the AfD, for example, in Germany, supporting QAnon in the streets. And they're crazy, okay? Yeah. We have the ability, I don't care, get your kids, get the wagon, get 5 signs, and stand out in front of your house every Friday and make a party of it. You're right. And like I said today on my Twitter feed, let's take back the phrase, we the people. Let's take back the American flag. Somebody mentioned here, QAnon's in France. Yes, they are. And they're very crazy. Okay. But let's take back this whole initiative that the rest of the world is against us and they're wondering and worrying about America. If I was still overseas, okay, I'm looking at you, Angela, and I lived in your neighborhood, which is an awesome neighborhood, I'd be down in front of Globetrotter, the camping store where all those Americans go every week. I love that part of Frankfurt. And I'd be holding myself a little rally, handing out donuts and Krispy Kremes and all sorts of things, right? To let them know the Americans are here, right? And that we are making our voice known to defend democracy. Right? What did they say? My grandfather, when he landed in France, what is it? Lafayette, nous sommes arrivés, right? We've arrived. Well, I think it's time to arrive again on a global scale. If we see you do it, maybe your ma out in Indiana and your other relatives will do it.
Yeah, that's a really great idea, to have a democracy day on a regular basis.
I like it.
Yeah, it's an awesome idea. We're at the top of the hour, 3 o'clock for you guys, 9 o'clock for us. We still have a lot of questions in the queue, but I think...
A speed round.
A speed round, okay. I don't know if you guys have to leave right at this moment.
I don't.
We have a question from.
I have to leave within 10 minutes.
Okay, all right. We'll
I'm
make
good.
it quick. We'll make it quick. This is a question specifically for you, Ruth, from Chris Gross. Can you unmute and ask your question quickly?
Yes, I'll keep the question very simple. It's what can you say are the similarities between the Weimar Republic and the USA today and during the Trump administration and the enablers, the Republican Party?
Oh, I'm getting my coffee for that answer.
Thanks, Malcolm. Well, one big thing that is what the debacle of the rise of Hitler taught was if you don't have a unified opposition, you're going nowhere. And I remember I couldn't fit it in my book, but I'm not a Trotskyist, but Leon Trotsky was publishing a lot of stuff. He watched what happened in Italy, and he was begging the communists not to call the democratic socialists or social democrats. They were being called, social fascists, because it was like communists or nobody. And Trotsky was saying, no, you can't do this. Please don't do this. This is like just going to split us. So we have less of that here because we only have these two giant parties, but there is understandable anger at the Democrats, but it's going to be it's fruitless to have that right now. You got to all band together, because otherwise they're just going to, they're going to prevail. And another reason is that Trump subjected the GOP to authoritarian style party discipline, and they have a unified messaging, which is very, very effective. Going back to what Malcolm was saying about information warfare, highly effective. Democrats don't have that because of the nature of pluralist democracy. Fine, we don't want a Trump telling us to all do this or get death threats, but it's not effective. And that's why unity is so important.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, all right. Our next question is from Timothy B. Can you please unmute and ask your question? Are you there, Timothy?
Yeah, that's me.
Okay.
There's been a lot of social research on the fact that challenging people on their facts, if they have a belief system, only hardens the belief system. You cannot convince them in a logical argument. Knowing this, we have to mobilize as many people as possible who are not fact immune, who are not engulfed in their ideological presumption that America is failing if authoritarianism is not installed. How do we concretely assure that our voting base is not cut off by Republican state legislatures determined to solidify and cement a minority as adequate for being elected?
And the only thing that we can do at this point is pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. And that's going to take an enormous amount of pressure on Senators Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin, or maybe even get an independent out there like Lisa Murkowski to come out and suspend the rules for filibustering against voting rights. That's it. 2 people is all we need to influence. 2 people. And I think there should be a national push on those 2 people. My problem is not Joe Manchin. I understand where he comes from. But if he passes it, he can almost guarantee he'll get reelected in West Virginia, because it will free up an entire base of people who need to vote. Hey, Election Day will be a national holiday, a federal holiday. And mail-in balloting can be done by anybody. That's his only chance. Kyrsten Sinema, I have no clue what's going on with her. She came out as a green. She was supposed to be a hardcore progressive, and is now, people are wondering whether she's going to defect to the Republicans.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Art Shankler. I think I have the next question and a couple comments. I live in Belgrade, Serbia, and I just want to note that even with all the political violence and volatility in our region and lots of bad things going on, I think the events of January 6th would be unprecedented even here. Nothing like that, I think, has happened in the political history in the region, as horrible as it is. Second thing, I just wanted, Mr. Nance, you mentioned your book, The Plot to Hack America. As I recall, you wrote about Ali Chalupa, a woman of Ukrainian descent. I don't know whether you know, but she used to be the executive director of Democrats Abroad.
Oh, Alexandra, is that right? No,
Yes,
but she was targeted by the Russians. I mean, her emails are spread everywhere, and her name is mud amongst right-wing crazies, right? She's part of the great globalist conspiracy. Interesting, you should mention that you're from Belgrade. I helped bomb Belgrade.
They haven't forgotten, I'm sure. They haven't forgotten.
But there was that little incident back in what, 1914, 1912, assassinating somebody in Belgrade?
Yeah, well, it was in Sarajevo, but close enough.
Oh, you're right. You're right. It was in Sarajevo.
The
Been there too. But on a good note, I did try to kill Ratko Mladic with an airstrike, and it didn't work. But there was an incident in 2016 you need to pay attention to, and that was the attempted coup d'etat in Montenegro, which was being carried out. Interesting. NATO intelligence, U.S. intelligence have been tracking the Russian intelligence officers who were meeting in Belgrade with Serbian ultra-nationalists to assassinate and wipe out everyone in the Montenegrin parliament and the president. And the purpose of that was to put in a Serbian majority government there and to open the port to Russia. And fascinating component is 4 things the Russians were going to do in 1 week. Elect Donald Trump. They were going to overthrow the government in Montenegro. A couple of weeks later, it was going to be the French election. They were going to get Marine Le Pen in, and the entire European order would have flipped on its head. So pay attention to your little neighborhoods, you know. But
yeah, we do. We try. Anyway, what I was going to say, when we were watching the video earlier and we were all disturbed, I made the comment in the chat box that there are millions of Americans who unfortunately would not be disturbed by watching that video. And several people pointed out that many people have not, because of what you talked about, disinformation, that Fox has never shown the events of January 6th. And as a result, people are not reacting that way. I guess I would ask you, does that 30%, do you think they would be disturbed? And from an electoral politics standpoint, do you think that the center 30% are disturbed by what happened on January 6th?
Well, we know for a fact that the bottom 30% there have now believe all that fighting was Antifa, but simultaneously were patriots. So go figure. What was the old saying? Hitler took 1/3 of his country, co-opted another 1/3 to wipe out 1/3. I think the center of America is sleeping. Ruth, what do you think?
Yeah, and I think one of the biggest triumphs of Trump and the right has been, and this is what you do with propaganda, which is drip, 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 day after day for years, is if you have an insurgency planned and you want to seize power and you're violent, like Trump is personally, and he's energized all the other people who are, you have to change the way that violence is viewed. And Trump started doing this at the very beginning. Like, I have quotes from his rallies in 2015, early 16, where over and over he said, the problem is we don't hurt people anymore. The problem is we become pussies. We don't like to bash heads anymore. So he's been doing this for 5 years now. And all successful authoritarian movements, some of them become genocidal, they change the way violence is viewed, so that instead of being repugnant to think about bashing in your neighbor's head, you see it as morally righteous and a patriotic act. And all coups, military coups, a few are bloodless, but most are violent, like the one in Chile, they justify themselves as saving the nation. So the violence and the repression is patriotic. And that's one of the things that scares me the most. And January 6th proves that. I was already tracking that. And I talk about it in my book, which was published before January 6th. If you do that successfully, there's no stopping you in terms of getting people to kill their neighbors and send their friends off to camps and whatever else happens. Not a cheery note to end on, but that's a fundamental, the book was designed to show people how the tools of propaganda and machismo and violence interact and corruption. And that's one of the nodes, changing the way people see violence.
Interesting fact, right after the January 6th insurrection, there was a coup d'etat in Myanmar, right? In the capital Rangoon, in Burma, what was Burma, now called Myanmar. And the communications chat amongst the conservatives, amongst the crazy conservatives at websites like patriots.win, which was called the Donald.win, and all that, and the QAnon world was that they were angry that a coup was occurring in Burma. And why wasn't that happening in America? They were thoroughly convinced in their crazy little minds that the U.S. Armed Forces was on Donald Trump's side and was defenders of democracy and would topple our government. When General Milley made his speech on video saying that the U.S. Armed Forces does not get involved in political affairs and that they are loyal strictly and only to the Constitution of the United States, I said this several times, that speech is going to go down in military history as one step below George Washington's speech at Newburgh, where he kept the U.S. Army from collapsing at the end of the war and overthrowing the government, right?
May we all live to see that. May we all live to see that. Yeah. I don't want Ruth to go without us expressing our thanks to her. This was incredible to have you here today. Really appreciate it. I'm glad, as you say, it wasn't the happiest note to end on, but I'm so glad you brought up the machismo and the violence that is linked to a certain kind of patriarchal ideology that needed to get in there. And thank you so much. It was wonderful to have you. And I don't know if you can see the chat, but there are many, many expressions of thanks to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Yes,
Bye-bye.
thank you both. So we don't want to end on a total bad note. You don't want to end on a total bad note, but so Teresa found this very great video that I want to share with everybody. It's hopefully will give you some hope for the future.
Should old acquaintance be forgot and never
I think Angela's internet froze.
Okay. Let me see if I can call this up.
And Angela froze along with it.
Yeah, that would be a sign then. Let's see. We're not going to take that as an omen of anything.
Could you share a link to that video, maybe?
Yes, I will share the link, but I can also share my screen. Just 1 second, and I'll also put the link in the chat. So here's the link, but I will share my screen. I'm not as professional as Angela. All right.
Oh, Teresa, we don't hear the sound.
Okay.
There's a share audio button you got to click when you share your screen.
What audio?
Tim said there's a share audio button, Teresa.
Okay, hold on a second. Sorry, guys. I can hear it, so it's distracting me completely.
And when you click share screen, the bottom left, there'll be a share sound checkbox. You just check that as well.
Okay. Nope, don't see it. Okay. Maybe somebody else can share it with the link because I'm not getting it together.
You want me to try, Teresa?
I think Eileen.
Can you see my screen, everyone?
Yes, yes, go ahead.
Excellent.
Should old acquaintance be forgot and never brought to mind? Should old acquaintance be forgot and days of old lang syne? For old lang syne, my dear, for old lang syne, we'll take a cup of kindness yet for old lang syne.
On January 6, 2021, politics in America was left fractured as a sitting president incited insurrection in an attempt to overturn the will of the American people. Americans died as democracy was left bleeding and bruised at the seat of government, while lawmakers fled for their lives.
Well, I had a little bit of a technical difficulty, so thank you very much. Our internet in our house just dropped out. It's awesome. Yes. So I hope everyone enjoyed the video. And we hope everyone votes this year. Tell all your friends to vote. And the other thing that you could do that would be super helpful is to donate. We are, of course, we are an all-volunteer organization, and we do a lot of work to help get out the vote by running ads. And if you want to donate, this would be very much appreciated. So thanks everyone for joining us today, and we hope that you will vote in the midterms, and we'll see you. Hopefully we will not have to remember this event every year. Teresa?
Yes, that's a wonderful wish to end on. And you didn't think you were going to get out without seeing Vote from Abroad one more time. So there it is. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming out and for your insightful questions for our guests. And I think we've all been moved in many ways by this evening. We have one more question. Katie, did you want to ask something?
Not after such a nice close, Teresa. I would only, I would not ask my question, or maybe I would just quickly turn it into a comment that says, looking at that clip again, it was amazing, not just the courage of the police and the intelligence, but the restraint. I've lived in a lot of countries where they would have used their weapons, and then what that day would have been. I wanted comments on that, but instead I would close with, as Angela said, and Teresa, vote from abroad, not only vote, really a call to action. We can win in November. It doesn't matter. It matters, of course, but with the bad voting laws that have been passed in the states, and even if we don't get a federal law to protect voting rights, we can still win, but only if we do everything that we can do in 2022. So I really urge everybody to not only get your ballot and vote, but make sure you bring people along with you.
Yes.
Because we won't win in 2022 if we don't work hard. So let's work really hard. Thanks for this beautiful event.
Thank you, everyone. Well, it's a great rallying cry to end on. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you for spending some of it with us.
Yeah, and don't lose sleep, just fight. We have to fight. Seriously.
Agonize and organize. We can do both.
Very good.
Yes, we can. So I guess we're going to end the live stream.